Hey everyone, this is Carla Black coming to you from Austin, Texas. Welcome to another episode of Highly Unorthodox, the show that takes you behind the scenes of the Netflix hit show Unorthodox. Today I'm going a little bit OTD, off the derrick, which is an expression used by the Satmars when somebody leaves the community, because I'm not speaking to somebody who was on the show or had anything to do with it. Today, I'm so excited to have my good friend of 25 years, Eric Deggans, television critic for NPR and also a commentator for MSNBC. He's also author of the book Race Baiter, How the Media Wields Dangerous Words to Divide a Nation. He's got a very, very deep knowledge of television, and we don't always agree, but we'll find out how close we are on the topic of unorthodox. So here's Eric. Eric, I know how busy you are. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me about Jews.
I'm here to talk to you about a TV show that features.
It's a TV show with a lot of
Yeah. As a non-Jewish, non-female person, I feel like the least qualified person to actually be talking about.
However, you did go to a Jewish school.
I did go to a Jewish middle school. I was at this school from 5th grade to 8th grade. I had to learn Hebrew. We did have morning prayer services. We did have Shabbat services every Friday. We celebrated every major Jewish holiday. My band teacher was a Holocaust survivor, still had a tattoo on his arm.
Wow.
And when we reached 8th grade, they would have this session every Friday where you'd sit down with the rabbi who was the rabbi for the temple that sponsored the school, and you have these discussions about Jewish law. And that was when I really got familiar with this idea that everything's a discussion, everything can be talked about, that there's no question you can ask that is out of bounds. And at least that's how they were. You know, they were a very progressive temple. That also, to me, is sort of the tragedy of unorthodox, is that this is a system, this is a community where you are not allowed to ask questions.
This is interesting because I was having this thought this morning, that the main thing that men are expected to do in a community like Satmar is to study Torah. So your role is to study and learn, but to not ask questions. What was your impression of the show Unorthodox overall?
Well, I did really like it. I thought it was a complex and sophisticated look at a universe that doesn't often get that kind of treatment in film and television, which I thought was really important. One thing that struck me about it, and I'm sure you've probably heard this before, is that because it's based on the memoir of a woman who left that community and wanted to assert her independence by leaving that community, there wasn't a lot of space given to people who might find solace in that community and actually believe in those beliefs and actually gain strength from following those beliefs. And that was the one weak point I saw in the TV show, was that there wasn't an acknowledgement that there are some people who follow this way of life and it isn't a negative influence in their life. It isn't necessarily poisonous for them or toxic for them. And that's the one thing that we didn't see. And I understand the producers are trying to tell a very important and specific story of how women, and this one woman in particular, was oppressed by this system, by this value system. But you always want to also try to respect the fact that there are some people who feel that that's a way of life that feeds them, that sustains them, that is important to them.
It is a very insular community that does not want the attention from the outside world. So a portrayal of a group that wants to mainly be not bothered and doesn't have the internet and doesn't have Netflix. And also, what was an interesting choice, I thought, was the first half was a little bit more based on her life. The part where she goes to Berlin is completely fiction, although she did go to Berlin.
But that sort of discovering who she is and what she cares about and how she wants to live her life, all of that felt really authentic. I thought they did a pretty good job of picking up the story. You never had the sense that once they started telling the fictional part of the story, that it suddenly felt inauthentic, or it suddenly felt like they had these characters doing things that didn't make any sense. The two men who come to take her back to the community, you know, one of them is an incredible hypocrite, and you know, with a gambling addiction, and all of these, you know, using this trip as an excuse to sort of indulge all these things that he can't do when he's in New York. The other character is sort of a mama's boy who's never really taken a hard look at the consequences of the system that he was asking his wife to live under.
Right.
And so again, you have two characters who are supremely flawed compared to the people that she meets when she goes to Europe. Classical music students, they're asserting their own independence, they're finding themselves, but they seem much more fulfilled. They seem much more centered. They seem much more healthy than the people that she's fleeing in New York City. That's in keeping, I think, with the spirit of the work that it's based on. As a critic, I'm always sort of pushing for the best version, right? This is a great TV show, and I enjoyed it. But if I was somebody who followed this faith, I would feel like they didn't allow for the possibility that men and women might find fulfillment living that kind of life. So I think to some people that's going to be a minor quibble.
Mm-hmm. Great points. So this is the first television show ever for Netflix in Yiddish. And obviously Yiddish is not a highly spoken language outside of that kind of a community. But I wanted to ask you, because of course Parasite won Best Picture of the Year. Do you think subtitles are becoming more popular and international shows are becoming more popular than they had been previously?
Netflix is sponsoring a lot of production in countries that don't necessarily speak English. All of that is subtitled. And then also they're bringing in TV shows from other countries and subtitling them. Israeli television is producing a lot of shows that are either being sort of rebooted and retrofitted for American audiences, or that are just being shown to American audiences with subtitles.
Yeah. Of course, Homeland was based on an Israeli series, but now The Baker and the Beauty is, right. I don't know how that's doing, but that's an American show that, interestingly enough, they made that a Spanish-speaking Cuban family versus an Israeli family. Right. But shows like Fauda, which right. is fantastic. I don't know if you've seen Shtisel and Shrugim. Either. No, I haven't seen those. But those are Israeli shows too. And I've noticed more than once, there's, I think, 5 Israeli actors that are in all of these shows.
I know. That's one thing that when you start watching British television, you start to realize that there's like a cadre of people. Like if you've watched something that really crossed the pond, like Doctor Who, and then you start watching British shows that are lesser known. Oh, hey, I remember that person. Oh, hey, there's that person. The smaller the country, right. You know, the more likely it is you're going to have a smaller group of actors who kind of appear in right. everything.
So what did you think about Shira Haas's performance?
Oh yeah, she's amazing. A TV show like this or a movie like this, the lead role is so important, because if you don't care about that character, you don't care about the show. Right. So she, from the very first scene where you see her trying to figure out what she can carry with her as she's about to leave, from the very beginning, you've got to care about that woman. You've got to see her doing this stuff and go, why is she doing this? Why is she hiding what she's right. doing? Where's she going? Why does she feel the need to flee? That's something that I think actors just kind of possess as an innate talent, the ability to pick up a cup of coffee or read a sheet of paper and make you want to watch them. and so she has that. From the very beginning that you see her, you really want to know her story. You want to find out what's going on with her. And you're immediately sympathetic to her. That's one of the things that struck me, was that from the first scenes, you're sort of like, wow, she seems to be in trouble. And I want to know why she's running. And I hope she makes it. The fact that they managed to communicate all of that early on, where she has almost no lines, I thought it was a real statement. Here's a character that you are going to care about.
Right.
Here's a story that's going to be complex. And here is a performance that you are going to want to watch again and again and again through all the episodes of this. And what's interesting to me too about this show is that they don't really signpost when they are going back in time.
Mm-hmm.
So you will see a scene, and then another scene will start where the actress is playing a version of herself before she got married. The way she's dressed is different and her hairstyle is different. And that's the only outward signal that you're watching someone at a different point in their life, other than how she's acting. And
Right.
so, again, it puts a lot of onus on the actors to communicate that they are relating to each other in a different way. Because I didn't know anything about this set, I didn't realize her head was shaved. I don't think she takes the wig off until, the middle of the second episode or something?
Well, her head is shaved. There's a scene where her head is shaved before the wedding, and she's in tears.
There's a scene when she's in Europe, and all the musicians go out into the water, and she decides to go out into the water, and she takes off her wig.
The wig off. Mm-hmm.
That's the first sign for the viewer that her head is shaved. Now, women may have noticed, or people who know wigs may have noticed that she was wearing a wig. I did not realize she was wearing a wig until she did that. But there's no signpost. There's no title card that comes up and says 2 years ago. You know what I mean? So you really have to pay attention, and the actors really have to communicate by how they react to things. Clearly, this was a TV show that was meant for Western eyes, right? Mm-hmm. So they already know the audience is gonna kind of be on her side. She has a drunkard forefather, and he's disgraced the family. She has a battle axe of a mother-in-law who was extremely judgmental of her from the moment that she saw her. And this is a society that doesn't openly talk about anything connected to marriage and sex. So much of that community seems to be about the comfort of men and the labor of women.
And also the naivete is really very obvious in that scene where Moshe and Yankee are in Berlin looking for Esty, and Yankee takes the phone and says, "Phone, where is Esty?"
Right. Well, he's never had a smartphone, but he's heard.
Of course.
Yankee kind of makes this journey where he doesn't realize how much the system is toxic to his wife until he talks to her. That's also an interesting moment that he's open to that. That's my biggest quibble with it, is they could have presented one or two characters who largely have a positive experience inside their religion. Then I think you would get the sense that the belief system itself is getting a fair shake from the show. There's still a part of me, that critic part of me, I would say that, the critic is the person who looks at a great painting and finds the one little flaw inside and tell people.
You can't help yourself, can you?
Well, it's our job. It's our job. It's our job to say there's a little piece of paint flaking.
The Mona Lisa, her smile, if she could just look a little happier. I was thinking as you were talking, I think there's two kinds of people, Eric: conformists and nonconformists. And the conformists will be very happy with structure, and nonconformists will never be happy with structure. They'll always be pushing against the envelope, not necessarily in a bad way, but just because they question the status quo, while other people, it doesn't matter if the status quo makes no sense at all. They're very comfortable in that kind of a system.
Your ultimate responsibility as a member of this community is to procreate and have kids and rebuild the race. And the question the series asks is to what end? What good does it do to rebuild the race if you're rebuilding the race under a system where women are not allowed to be people? Mm-hmm. Or where people are not allowed to reach towards the things that they find fulfillment in.
The options are have children.
Yeah. There's no allowance for the possibility that people might not find those very narrow options very fulfilling. And there's no allowance for the idea that you might compromise.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your perspective on everything. And as usual, I don't always agree with you, but
Sure.
but I always appreciate your perspective, and it's a lot to think about.
I'll talk to you later. Stay healthy and safe.
Highly Unorthodox is brought to you by our sponsors, Texas Hill Country Homes, serving all your real estate needs in Central Texas, and Creative by Carla, unblocking your creative side. On the next episode of Highly Unorthodox, we go back on the derech. I'll be speaking with Abby Stein, who is the author of Becoming Eve. She was actually on the show as an extra. She played a pregnant woman, and she's got a fascinating story, and she will share that with us next week. So tune in. See you next time on Highly Unorthodox. Thanks for watching.